Hisar Foundation and Engro Foundation, in association with TV1, NewsOne, Wakeup and FM 91, presents the 5th Karachi International Water Conference webinar series on climate change and pandemic impact on water.
I'm Zareen Bakir. I'm a Gender and Natural Resource Management Specialist and also a council member of Hisar Foundation. I'd like to welcome you all to the 5th Karachi International Water Conference on Climate Change and the Pandemic, the Impact on Water, presented by Hisar Foundation. Today is the last webinar of the series, which is on water and climate change, reimagining women's leadership.
The 4 webinars that we have culminated through the webinar series. The first one was Code Red for Humanity, Climate Action Now. The second is Circular Water Economy in Urban Context. The third was Thinking the Unthinkable, Harnessing the Pandemic to Improve SDG 6 Health and Sanitation. And the fourth one that we're gathered here today, Water and Climate Change, Reimagining Women's Leadership.
Climate, COVID, and conflict are going to be the new normal and a game changer on a planet that is warming up rapidly and a world where the population growth rate is exceeding the capacity of the finite resources that sustain life. This imbalance will widen the supply and demand gap, pitting vested interest groups against each other, triggering demographic shifts, and creating new pockets of vulnerability.
Talking about changing women's role in the water sector, as my friend Aisha just mentioned, that change is already happening. Women are actually prepared. They care about things and they are prepared because they have been doing this for centuries. Okay? The day-to-day bag-breaking work, which is what we now require to handle the problems and the climate-related problems, they have done it for centuries. So now they are prepared to live in a climate-changed world. Men are not.
So our next speaker is Fazilda Nabil, who will be talking about When Women Lead, looking back at eco-feminist movements in history. Fazilda Nabil is a doctoral researcher and tutor in international development at the University of Sussex. Fazilda, please go ahead. Welcome.
हमारी अगली स्पीकर हैं डॉक्टर फजल्दा नबील, जो कि यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ ससेक्स में रिसर्चर डेवलपमेंट स्टडीज़ हैं। इनका मौजू है जब ख़वातीन क़यादत करती हैं, माजी की माहौलियात पसंद तहरीक पर एक नज़र।
Hi, thank you so much. First of all, I'd just like to begin by thanking Hisar Foundation, particularly Seema Kamal and Sana and Faria, for giving me the opportunity to speak about something that's so close to my heart. So in my talk today, I really want to sort of, to set them just apart from the forward-looking talks from both Aisha and Simi. I want to go back in history and explore the role of women in leading efforts for change, drawing inspiration from the famous historical environmental movements led by women, such as, in the case of the Love Canal, the Chipko movement, the Greenbelt movement in Kenya, which is more well known. And I want us to be able to draw inspiration from these eco-feminist movements in order to analyze how, or in order to realize how we can bolster women's role for effectively leading climate activism in Pakistan. Building on very many of the things that Simi talked about. So first, before I discuss the 2 stories that I want to discuss, the 2 case studies that I selected for this talk, I would very quickly and very simply, without getting into any dense definitions, I want to simply unpack the idea of what ecofeminism is and why it's relevant. So ecofeminism is both an ideology and a movement that sees climate change, gender equality, and social injustice as related issues. And they're all tied to masculine dominance, male dominance in the society. People who are most affected by environmental destruction, which has been established by studies over and over again, women, particularly indigenous women, who are dependent on their natural environment for subsistence, and also women of color, are are the ones who are best equipped to address the environmental destruction and identify the right solutions. So the idea that, when you're close to the problem, you're essentially also the best person, or you're essentially also the closest to figuring out the solutions, is what really makes the case for, promulgating the role of women as far as climate activism is concerned. Now, with this background, I want to discuss two examples of grassroots activism by women, one of which is from the Global South, the Chipko movement, and then the other is from the Global North, and then see how we, as locally in Pakistan, the nature of the climate action movement, of climate activism in Pakistan, and how it can draw inspiration from these movements. So the first, the Chipko movement, the Chipko literally just means to embrace, and to embrace a tree, to avoid it from being felled. It was a non-violent movement that started back in 1973 in the Uttarakhand region in India. It is best remembered for collective mobilization of women for the protection of the forest. So what happened was that the forest department in Uttarakhand, it refused to grant permission to these villagers, the local indigenous women and men, to fell ash trees for making agricultural tools. However, instead, the forest department gave permission to a sports good manufacturer, corporate company, to clear that area of land for commercial use. So this was an example of activism by indigenous women who had very little or no training, for this kind of activism, but to whom this resource, the forest trees, were so central. Now, in my next story, or the next little a case study that I want to discuss, we'll travel all the way from the forest in northern India to Love Canal, which is a suburban housing society in the Niagara Falls in the 1950s in the United States, and see how working class women at home were able to bring about a phenomenal change when confronted with an ecological crisis. So the Love Canal story is similar but a little different. In this case, in the 1900s, there was an entrepreneur by the name of William Love who began to dig a canal close to the Niagara Falls, to the Niagara River, in fact, in an attempt to use the Niagara Falls water power as a source of renewable energy. But about a couple of years into the construction of the canal, the project was abandoned because it was no longer feasible. Tesla had come up with a better way of harnessing renewable energy in that area. And then this excavated site where the canal was being dug became a dumping site for effluents, both from the city of Niagara Falls, also from the US Army, and then a chemical company which set up. So it had all sorts of about 21,000 tons of chemical waste were deposited over the next 30 years in this excavated site. And it included radioactive waste, it included a dioxin, it included pesticides, caustic solvents. What is worse is, the Hooker Chemical Company, it just simply covered the area. And so after the canal had reached its capacity and it could not take any more effluent, the Hooker Chemical Company simply lined the area with clay, and underneath there were all these caustic effluents in metal barrels, buried underneath. So what happens about 30, 40 years later is that the Niagara Falls School Board wanted to, was looking for some cheap land, and the Hooker Chemical Company offered this land on which, under which lay that toxic effluent. And the Niagara Falls School Board bought it for $1, simply just $1. And after this, because it was a school that was constructed there in the adjoining area, there was a housing society that was constructed, and everything remained nice and pretty for about 20 years until the residents started having issues. They started complaining of smells in their stench from the basement, chemical stench. They were experiencing, in a particular given year, only about 4 out of 26 births were normal babies. The results were miscarriages or birth defects. So a lot happening in that area. And this is when this stay-at-home mother by the name of Louise Gibbs, she came up. And she collected, she realized that there's something deeper going on here, and she collected the women of the area. She formed an association called the Love Canal Homeowners Association, and women got together. They fought for 5 years, and they eventually won. But what do these two movements, the nature of these are kind of different and yet the same. What do these two movements mean for, charting the roadmap for the future women's leadership, climate action in Pakistan? We have seen inspiring examples of women's activism around the world. We've also seen climate activism and women's role, on the front line. For a few years now. There's citizen groups such as Climate Action Now, the Hukuk-e-Khalq movement, the Women and Water networks, such as one run by Hisar Foundation. They all give women a chance to lead and a space to lead climate activism. And this is all very heartening. In Pakistan, the identification of indigenous peoples is tricky. But for instance, the Hindko-speaking people in the Swat and Chitral valleys, the tribal peoples in the Gilgit-Baltistan region, the Saraiki, the Potawari, the tribal people of the Indus, all of these communities and the women in these communities need to be empowered. If we are to, or if we want to truly scale up inclusive and truly and inclusively scale up women's leadership for environmental activism. I think I'll end here, and I'll be open to questions whenever you're ready to take them.
Thank you so much, Fazilda, for such an inspiring presentation.
डॉक्टर फजल्दा नबील, मैं हिसार फाउंडेशन की बहुत शुक्रगुजार हूँ जिन्होंने मुझे मेरे पसंदीदा मौजू पर बात करने का मौका दिया। मैं आयशा और सीमी की ही बात को आगे बढ़ाऊंगी और तारीख में होने वाले माहौलियाती तहरीक में जिन औरतों ने बहुत बड़ा किरदार अदा किया के हवाले से बात करूंगी, जैसे कि ग्रीन बेल्ट मूवमेंट, कीनिया मूवमेंट थी, और मैं कोशिश करूंगी कि इसके ज़रिए हमारी ख़वातीन की हौसला अफजाई हो और वो पानी के हवाले से अपने किरदार को अदा करने के लिए आगे आएं। जैसे कि सीमी ने भी जिक्र किया, अपनी बात आगे बढ़ाने से पहले मैं माहौलियात पसंदी के हवाले से थोड़ी बात करना चाहूँगी कि माहौलियात पसंदी है क्या। माहौलियात पसंदी एक नज़रिया और तहरीक दोनों हैं जिसमें माहौलियाती तब्दीली, सनती मसावात और माशरती नाइंसाफ़ी सब शामिल हैं, और ये सब एशियाई निज़ाम से जुड़े हुए हैं, और जो लोग इससे सबसे ज़्यादा मुतासिर हैं इनमें ज़्यादातर ख़वातीन हैं। जब आप मसले से दो चार हो जाते हैं तो यकीनन आप इसके हल के बहुत करीब होते हैं। अब मैं दो तहरीकों के हवाले से बात करना चाहूँगी। इनमें एक है चिपको मूवमेंट। चिपको का मतलब है दरख्त को ऐसे गले लगाना कि इसे गिरने से बचाया जा सके। ये एक गैर मुतशद्दिद तहरीक थी जो कि इंडिया के अथरकंड खित्ते में 1973 में चलाई गई। इसे जंगलात की हिफाजत के लिए ख़वातीन के किरदार और आगाही के हवाले से याद किया जाता है। हुआ ये था कि इदारे जंगलात ने गांव के इन लोगों को एस्ट्रेज गिराकर ज़राअत करने से मना कर दिया था, जबकि इसी इदारे जंगलात ने एक खेल का सामान बनाने वाली कंपनी को इस जगह पर फैक्ट्री लगाने की इजाज़त दे दी थी। तो ये एक मिसाल है इन ख़वातीन की जिन्हें इस तरह की तहरीक चलाने की कोई तरबियत हासिल नहीं थी। अब मेरी अगली कहानी में हम सफ़र करेंगे इंडिया के एक गांव से, लव कैनाल का, जो कि एक शहरी सोसाइटी बनी। 1959 نیگرا فال میں تو لو کینال کی کہانی کچھ ملتی جلتی اور کچھ مختلف ہے۔ 19ویں صدی میں لو کینال کو ایک سوسائٹی بنانے کی تیاری شروع ہوئی، مگر 1920 میں میونسپل نے سوسائٹی کے لیے جگہ دینے سے انکار کر دیا، جس کے بعد یہ جگہ محض کچرا پھینکنے کے کام آنے لگی۔ اس کینال کو ایک کیمیکل کمپنی نے خرید لیا اور وہ اپنا ضائع شدہ کیمیکل اس کینال میں پھینکنے لگے، جس میں بہت سے زہریلے مادے شامل تھے۔ یہ سلسلہ کئی دہائیوں تک چلتا رہا اور پھر اس کیمیکل کے زہریلے اثرات سامنے آنا شروع ہو گئے، جن میں لوگوں میں بیماریاں بڑھنے لگیں اور ان کے گھروں تک اس کیمیکل کی بو آنے لگی۔ جب یہاں کی رہائشی خاتون لوئی گپ نے قدم اٹھایا اور اپنے ساتھ خواتین کو شامل کر کے اس کے خلاف ایک تحریک چلائی جو کہ 5 سال تک چلتی رہی، تو کیسے یہ دونوں تحریکیں بیک وقت الگ بھی ہیں اور ایک جیسی بھی، اور کیسے یہ کہانیاں پاکستان کی خواتین کی حوصلہ افزائی میں کردار ادا کر سکتی ہیں۔ پچھلے کئی سالوں میں بہت سی تحریک چلائی گئیں۔ پاکستان کے بہت سے خطے، جن میں گلگت بلتستان، چترال جہاں ہند کو بولی جاتی ہے، اس سرائکی خطے، پوٹوہاری اور سندھ کے بہت سے خطے شامل ہیں۔ یہاں پر خواتین کو تربیت دینے کی شدید ضرورت ہے تاکہ عورتیں ماحول کے حوالے سے اپنا بہترین کردار ادا کر سکیں۔ اب یہاں پر میں اپنی بات ختم کرتی ہوں۔
Move on to the next portion of the webinar, the panel discussion. I'd like to introduce Meher Naushirwani, who will be moderating the next session. She is a specialist on conservation and environmental management with a particular expertise on gender. With over 35 years of experience, she brings a unique multi-stakeholder perspective to all her work. She's a board member of Hisar Foundation and is a treasurer and board member of the Karachi Conference Foundation.
بہت شکریہ فضلدہ۔ اب میں اپنے پروگرام کے اگلے حصے پینل ڈسکشن کی طرف بڑھوں گی۔ ہماری اگلی اسپیکر ہیں مہر نوشیروانی، جو کہ حصار فاؤنڈیشن کی ممبر ہیں اور IUCN میں چیئر اسپیشلسٹ برائے صنف، ماحول اور معاشیات ہیں۔
Handing over to you.
Thanks, Zareen. Thank you very much. And welcome participants and our panelists today to the second half of our session. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to another stimulating discussion over the next half an hour, 45 minutes. I'd like to begin by introducing the first panelist today that we have, Seema Tahir Khan. And Seema, I'd like to begin by, you're here with us in the studio, but just to give a brief introduction. Seema is a communication specialist in the field for 40 years, co-founder of Interflow Group of Companies, currently CEO of Airways Media Private Limited, member of Hisar think tank on food and water sustainability. You create awareness campaigns on food, water and livelihood issues, including talk shows, reports and TV serials on the subject. You're an executive member of various boards and an advocate of nature-based solutions to address sustainability objectives. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Seema. We have 3 questions for all the panelists. So I'll put the questions to you first, and then you can answer as you like in whatever order you want. But the questions today are focusing on equal participation and mandates for decision making in terms of women's role in the water sector, climate change and the impact on water, future challenges for gender equity, and how do you reimagine women's leadership? So these are the sort of broad ambit or the broad questions that we're posing to all our panelists today. And you have 8 minutes, and you can speak in terms of your experience in the field, in terms of women's leadership, how you see, how you reimagine it, how you think women's, because from what we've heard from the discussions already, what are your perspectives? What does your experience say? How do we move forward?
مہر نوشروانی، بہت بہت شکریہ۔ تمام پینلسٹ کو خوش آمدید کہتی ہوں۔ مجھے امید ہے کہ اگلے 45 منٹ پر ہم مفید معلومات اکٹھی کر سکیں گے۔ سب سے پہلے شروعات میں پہلی پینلسٹ سیما طاہر خان سے کروں گی، جو کہ کمیونیکیشن اسپیشلسٹ ہیں اور ایئر ویز میڈیا کی CEO بھی ہیں۔ ماحول کے حوالے سے ان کی کئی خدمات رہی ہیں۔ انٹرفلو گروپ کی کو فاؤنڈر بھی ہیں۔ ماحولیاتی آگاہی کے حوالے سے بھی انہوں نے بہت کام کیا ہے۔ سیما، ہمارے 3 سوالات ہیں۔ پہلا سوال، پانی کے سیکٹر میں عورتوں کی مساوی شمولیت، پھر ماحولیاتی تبدیلی کے پانی پر اثرات اور مستقبل میں درپیش مسائل اور ان کے منفی مساوات پر اثرات، اور تیسرا یہ کہ آپ خواتین کی قیادت کو کیسے دیکھتی ہیں۔ تو یہ سوالات ہیں جو ہم تمام پینلسٹ سے کریں گے۔ آپ کے پاس 8 منٹ ہیں۔
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you Hisar Foundation, Dynamic Seema Kamal, and the rest of you for having me here. As far as I'm concerned, I'm neither a specialist nor an expert. I am perhaps a tool for communicating all the concerns and all the observations and all the policy decisions through media.
Okay.
So, as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to take the last bit as to answer the question.
Certainly.
So, reimagining women leadership. Because I am also a visualizer of sorts, so I will take you and the rest of the listeners on a flight of fantasy. I will start with my imagination. So in my imagination, I see a pregnant woman, well nourished, strong and sturdy, looking forward to childbirth, her second child being born after a gap of 3 years. I imagine a little girl going to school from a conservative neighborhood where she sees the mullah from the mosque waving to her as she passes by. I see a woman picking cotton in the fields in the scorching sun, and I see her at the end of the day, she's collecting cash as her labor given to her. I see a woman walking into a skill development center in the rural area with nursery, a child care or daycare center where she can leave her children and go to work. I see a woman at a cash counter where easy to access banking services available to her at her doorstep. I see a woman financially stronger. I see a woman physically fitter. I see a woman happier in her environment at home or in a workplace. I see a woman who has the potential to rise and become a leader. While the ground realities have been very well clearly defined, spoken of, we know that the ground realities do not permit a woman to provide her or reach her full potential. So then I look at a stereotypical image of a woman anywhere in the world, particularly in South Asia, and I see a house sparrow. I see a docile house sparrow, or I see a graceful swan, but I see a mute woman. So I turn to nature for my inspiration, and I see the animal world. I see the lioness, I see other mothers, I see other female counterparts, and I choose to be an eagle, a female eagle. Why do I choose a female eagle to represent women? Is because there is a tide of change coming about. Environmental, climate change, political changes. We see an oligarchy governing. We see an elite in every parliament. We see women's voices being subdued. So I am an eagle soaring in the sky. And I will tell you the reason why I am an eagle. When we study an eagle's life, we see that a young eaglet learns to fly very fast. Why? Because her mother has torn down the nest, her comfort zone. This enables the eagle to spread her wings, the eaglet to spread her wings and attempt at flying. And soon she masters it and she flies high in the sky. Then I see an eagle in search of food for the eaglets. And from the height she will have a target, she will be focusing on food that she has to pick for her young ones. And she is going to brave any storm, any harsh wind, anything under this, on the planet to reach that target. So it's not by willpower, it's by wing power. She uses that wing power to reach to her destination. Then I see the eagle carrying a twig across the skies. Why is she doing that? She has a mate who's given a call for mating, but she doesn't make it simple for him. So she will drop the twig from a height and expect him to dive down, pick up that twig. In the meantime, she's flown higher. So it's making it even more difficult for him to reach that height. So she is not available and she is not attainable that easily. So when I compare the life of any woman across continents, I feel that it's time for women, the complexion to change. For the eagle is seeing women, the eagle is flying all across the globe, and she's seeing difficult terrain, she's seeing different complexion, she's seeing different women. And if the eagle can spot a girl in a chadar or in a scarf, a young girl from Pakistan, a remote Pakistani area, receive a Nobel Prize. When she sees young Greta standing up on a platform outside the summit and challenging governments and challenging leaders. She flies down south and she sees a woman trucker at a coal mine carrying coal across an arid land. She sees women across a scorching desert or an arid land carrying matkas of water to a destination 10 miles away. When she sees a drowning country, submerged country, have a woman, in a sari-clad woman who can take the country out of the dire straits and become an Asian tiger. When she sees a young woman from New Zealand stand up and face the hostility against religions and ethnic divides and challenge that and ask for tolerance and ask for considerations and ask for inclusions, she knows there is hope for the woman. And she knows that against these rising tides, against this threat of climate change, it will be women who will stand up and make the difference. So what is really required is inclusivity and integration of the rural woman into the policy making, the decision making, the roadmap creation, because they come with their indigenous solutions, they come with their strengths. So we must include them, but each and every one of us can play a role, and as media I have been trying, I will go on. Give me the stories from the rural, give me the stories from across the world, I'll visualize them, create drama or create talk shows or create webinars. So that's my contribution.
Thank you, Seema. I think for your articulation and clarity in terms of the issues, in terms of the picture you paint, the dream that we all aspire to, the reality of what we're all very aware of, but more importantly, the way you showed us the solutions and the way forward and how women can achieve what we want to achieve.
It is a matter of self-esteem,
yes, yes,
and realizing of one's potential.
Yes.
So when there are mentors, there are heroes from women, there are guides, there are policy makers and those in positions to implement. So let us all be a combined force that can facilitate them, and let us then reach out to our sisters across the country and see, because 51% women in the country are not a small number. We will, she has to rise.
She has to rise.
She will rise.
She will, yeah, she will.
So let's help her.
Certainly, yes, definitely. And I think in terms of what you have said, you've also shown us how change is possible and how we can actually move towards changing and bringing women into the mainstream, which is what we're here for today. There must be many questions from you, Seema, but I'll go to the next panelist and then we'll start.
May I say
yes,
something just before?
Yes,
because
certainly,
I'm thinking
certainly.
of that famous sher that most people will know. Nahi tera nasheman kasre sultani ki gumbad pe, tu shahi hai basera kar pahadon ki chatanon par. First time I'm thinking that the Shaheen Iqbal meant is a she-eagle. Yes, it's a she-eagle, and we never thought of it that way before.
That's right.
So thank you, Seema, for reimagining that.
Yes,
But
that's right.
I just add to this.
Please.
When Iqbal thought of the he-eagle per se, and there's something nature has taught us about the male eagle, is when he grows old and weary, he goes to the mountain top, he sits there and plucks out his feathers. Until new feathers appear, he will be in that seclusion. He will only surface after his body is covered with new feathers, so that he can take to the skies again. So when वो बसेरा करा है वहाँ पे, it's not because he is meant to sit there. It's because out of necessity he has gone there to re-emerge.
Yes, right.
That's really interesting.
That's very
Women
interesting.
re-emerging, hey?
Yes,
Yes.
you're reimagining and re-emerging. You know, as also as agents have changed. I mean, one of our earlier speakers said that we have to change the victim image of women. And that is so true, because now women are agents of change, and that's what we have to move forward. That's the image that we now
But
need.
it is also, I'm sorry I'm extending my, time, but you see the stereotypical imaging
Yes.
of a mute woman
Yes,
must now be countered.
that's right.
The parliamentarian, the patriarch, the decision maker will deny, because they are clutching on to their positions and their security is there. The parliament is their security blanket, the senate is their security blanket, top positions are their security blanket.
Yes.
That is their vote bank, and they will feed that vote bank to be in that position. We have to defy
That, yes.
and challenge. So we have to be the eagle that soars.
सीमा ताहिर खान, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया हिसार फाउंडेशन और सीमी कमाल आपका। सबसे पहले मैं आखिरी सवाल का जवाब देना चाहूँगी। तो ख़वातीन की क़यादत का तसव्वुर मैं आप सबको तख्लियाती ज़िंदगी में लिए जाना चाहूँगी। मैं देखती हूँ कि एक सेहतमंद शादीशुदा औरत को जो कि हामला है और जिसका दूसरा बच्चा पैदा होने वाला है पहले बच्चे की पैदाइश के 3 साल बाद, और अब तसव्वुर करूँगी कि एक ऐसी बच्ची जो कि स्कूल जाती है जिसका ताल्लुक़ एक दकियानूसी घराने से है, और वो देखती है कि मस्जिद का एक मुल्ला इसे हाथ हिला हिला कर देख रहा है। जैसे ही वो इसके पास से गुज़रती है, मैं देखती हूँ कि एक किसान खातून को जो कि दिन भर खेती बाड़ी करने के बाद शाम में अपनी उजरत ले रही है। मैं देखती हूँ एक शहरी औरत को जो कि एक चाइल्ड केयर में अपने बच्चे को छोड़कर अपने काम पर जा सकती है। मैं एक औरत को बैंक के कैश काउंटर पर देखती हूँ। मैं एक औरत को मुआशी तौर पर मुस्तहकम देखती हूँ। मैं एक औरत को जिस्मानी तौर पर सेहतमंद देखती हूँ। मैं एक औरत को खुश देखती हूँ, चाहे वो घर में हो या काम की जगह पर। मैं एक औरत को आगे बढ़ने की सलाहियत से भरपूर देखती हूँ। हम क्योंकि ज़मीनी हक़ाइक़ पर बात कर चुके हैं और ज़मीनी हक़ाइक़ इसके बरक्स हैं, फिर मैं देखती हूँ एक दुनिया में औरत के एक दकियानूसी तसव्वुर को ख़ास तौर पर जनूबी एशिया में, और मुझे सिर्फ घर की एक चिड़िया, बहुत सी मादा जानवरों को भी देखती हूँ, शेरनी को भी देखती हूँ, और मैं चील बनना पसंद करती हूँ। क्यों? क्योंकि चील का बच्चा बहुत जल्दी उड़ना सीख लेता है, इसलिए क्योंकि इसकी माँ बहुत जल्द घोंसला तोड़ देती है तो बच्चे को आसमान में उड़ना जल्दी आ जाता है। फिर मैं चील को देखती हूँ कैसे वो अपने बच्चों के लिए खाने की तलाश में रहती है, और इतनी ऊंचाई से भी इसकी नज़रें ज़मीन पर मरकूज़ होती हैं जहाँ से वो अपने बच्चों के लिए खाना हासिल कर सके, और इसके लिए वो हर किस्म की मुश्किल और तूफ़ान के सामना कर सकती है। फिर मैं चील को देखती हूँ कि कैसे इसे नर चील मिलने के लिए बुलाता है, मगर वो मज़ीद ऊंचाई की तरफ चली जाती है, यानी मादा चील नर के लिए आसानी से दस्तयाब नहीं होती। तो जब मैं औरतों को देखती हूँ तो अब वक्त है कि हमारी ख़वातीन भी चील से सबक हासिल करें। एक चील पूरी दुनिया में उड़ती है, वो हर रंग हर नस्ल की औरत को देखती है। वो देखती है कि पाकिस्तान की एक देही इलाके की लड़की नोबेल इनाम जीत सकती है। इसी तरह ग्रेटा इतनी ही हम उम्र में दुनिया के बड़े बड़े लीडरों की चैलेंज कर सकती है। वो देखती है कि एक औरत बड़ा सा ट्रक लेकर कोयले की कानों में काम कर रही है। फिर चील देखती है कि औरतें पानी के मटके सर पर लेकर 10-10 मील के सफ़र तय करती हैं। फिर वो देखती है कि एक साड़ी वाली औरत कैसे अपने मुल्क को खड़ा कर रही है। फिर वो देखती है कि न्यूजीलैंड की एक जवान औरत कैसे मजहबी इंतहा पसंदी के खिलाफ आवाज़ उठा रही है और कैसे सबको बर्दाश्त का दर्ज दे रही है। और चील जानती है कि इस वक्त में जबकि हमें माहौलियाती तब्दीली का सामना है, खवातीन ही इसका मुकाबला कर सकेंगी और बेहतरी ला सकेंगी। तो ज़रूरत इस बात की है कि देही खवातीन को पॉलिसी साजी में साथ मिलाया जाए, क्योंकि इनके पास मसाइल के हल मौजूद हैं और वो बड़ी तादाद में हैं। हम सब अपना किरदार अदा कर सकते हैं। मैं खुद बहैसियत मीडिया पर्सन इस हवाले से अपना किरदार अदा कर सकती हूँ। आप मुझे इस हवाले से कहानी दें और मैं इस पर ड्रामा बना सकती हूँ या फिर कोई टॉक शो बना सकती हूँ। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया सीमा, आपने जैसे हमें बताया और जैसे हल बताए वो बहुत मुफीद हैं। आपने हमें बताया कि कैसे तब्दीली मुमकिन है। सीमा जी बिल्कुल, हमें अब ज़रूर इस बारे में बात करनी चाहिए और एक दूसरे की मदद करनी चाहिए। 51% आबादी औरतों की कम नहीं है, हमें आगे बढ़ना होगा। सीमी कमाल, महर मैं कुछ कहना चाहूँगी। नहीं तेरा नशेमन कसर सुल्तानी की गुंबद पर, तू शाहीन है बसेरा कर पहाड़ों की चट्टानों में। पहली बार मैंने तसव्वुर किया कि इकबाल ने जिस शाहीन की बात की है वो मादा थी। तो शुक्रिया सीमा कि आपने हमें ये तसव्वुर दिया। सीमा, कुछ चीज़ों के बारे में कुदरत ने हमें सिखाया है और कुछ चीज़ें अब बदलनी चाहिए, जैसे कि औरतों को एक दकियानूसी खामोश तसव्वुर।
Hisar Foundation and Engro Foundation, in association with TV1, NewsOne, Waseb and FM 91, presents the 5th Karachi International Water Conference webinar series on climate change and pandemic impact on water.
We'll go to the next panelist, and I hope you are here. Granaz Baloch, are you online? Can you hear us?
Yes, exactly. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Is that you, Granaz? You're on the line? Thank you. Thank you
yes,
for being...
it's me.
Okay, great. Thank you for being with us today. I'd like to introduce Granaz to all our participants. Granaz Baloch works as an independent climate change researcher in water and gender issues in Balochistan. She is working on a PhD which focuses on gender-based challenges in rural Balochistan. She strongly believes that women must be part of every policy agenda, access to clean water and sanitation in public schools, impact of climate change on their lives, and participation in the decision-making processes and governance without any fear of gender discrimination. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Granaz, and I'll repeat the questions which I mentioned earlier, just so that you know where and how what we're discussing. So the 3 questions, and you can answer them in any way you like or whatever you would like to share with us. Equal participation and mandates for decision making, climate change and impact on water, further challenges for gender equity, and how do you reimagine women's leadership? And from the perspective of Balochistan, we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. You have 8 minutes, as you like. Thank you.
बहुत शुक्रिया। अब हम अपनी अगली स्पीकर की जानिब बढ़ेंगे। गिरनाज बलोच, हमारे 3 सवाल हैं। औरतों की मसावी शमूलियत, माहौलियाती तब्दीली के पानी पर असरात और मुस्तकबिल में दरपेश मसाइल और इनके सनती मसावात पर असरात।
Thank you so much. I will just ask a question to everyone in audience and or presenters. I just want to ask this question to everyone, that imagine that one morning you wake up and don't find a single glass of water. You need to go to your neighbor house, or you have to travel 10 to 12 kilometers just to get water to make a special coffee and take a bath and run away for your office. How do you feel it? And this is your daily job, early morning. It seems like summer or winter. So as Alok Sharma said in COP26, that climate, gender equality, even Malala said as well, that climate change, gender equality, and girls' education all are interlinked to each other. We cannot deny that they all are separate to each other. This is my one drop of what I say, that this is a drop from my presentation or my words. Like the second one is that how women role in Balochistan. Like collecting water is just a job, like inborn job. The second thing is that managing household water, whatever the situation, you are pregnant, you are in periods, you are in a critical, even deathbed, but first you have to manage the household water. This is your job. You have to do it. And the third thing is that, like, they don't know that what they are collecting, is the water quality is good or bad. They need to collect it and provide at home. This is their job. And if I talk about Balochistan government or laws, unfortunately, Ma'am Seema knows that we don't have water policy. We don't have climate change policy, unfortunately. If government of Pakistan or World Bank or Asian Development Bank talk about water in Balochistan, they talk only about water scarcity. That is enough. They never talk in deep down that what's happening with the woman who is collecting water. Maybe get raped, maybe sexually assaulted, maybe killed in honor killing, maybe deliver a baby on the way to river. This is the real situation, or this is the real scenario of Balochistan, if I talk. Across the world, if we take the statistics, like 200 million hours for each and every girl across the world every day to collect water. If we talk about in years, this is 22,800 years they just spent to collect water. So if, according to Malala Fund, recently they talk about in COP26 that in 2021, just alone 2021, 4 million girls just leave the education because of the climate change. If they say that in 2025, maybe 12 million girls will leave their schools. At last, my recommendation will be that when we think about climate change, we don't forget climate crisis is also water crisis. As Balochistan doesn't have any other option, just rainwater or groundwater. And as everyone knows that in media, everywhere, that water depletion is common nowadays. And we face shortage of rainfall every 7 or 5 years. But the question raised here that, what is the role of women? Where is women? No one can find a single woman in irrigation department of Balochistan. No one can find a single woman in Wapada in Balochistan. And my recommendation is that we should provide green skills, like we should tell the young girls about home waste management. We should tell them about renewable energy, make them skillful, provide them STEM education, provide them ways of transportation. But unfortunately, here I didn't mention about the respiratory diseases is very common across Balochistan, especially in southern, because we use wood for the fuel. We don't have gas. So we need to just cook food from the wood. This is our last and first option. And at last, I want to say that I'm working on my, as I mentioned in my profile, that I'm working on these stories. I have a lot of stories. These are just 2 stories and 3 stories I shared. I'm looking someone can help me to highlight these stories to the world, that water scarcity is not about only water. This is related to someone's life, who left school, who left leisures of life, who didn't sleep at night just to find a glass of water for family, for herself. This is not about only water scarcity. This is about someone's life as well. Like, we are living live experiences of climate crisis this time. And that's why I'm looking for someone can take these stories and publish it. And also we are thinking, writing a proposal that we should also analyze the household water quality in Balochistan, especially Gwadar and Turbat, to see what women are drinking at home. Because unfortunately, men are drinking Nestle water, men are drinking Irani water because they have a stomach problem, but unfortunately women are not, because they don't need it. They are made up of a special thing. But men need Nestle water or Irani water to survive, just for their luxurious life. This is from my side.
गरनाज बलोच, शुक्रिया। मैं आप सबसे एक सवाल करना चाहूँगी। तसव्वुर करें कि आप एक सुबह जागें और आपको अपने पड़ोस में या कुछ किलोमीटर का सफ़र करके जाना पड़े ताकि आप कॉफ़ी या चाय बना सकें, चाहे गर्मी हो या सर्दी, जैसे कि आलोक शर्मा ने COP26 में कहा और जैसा कि मलाला ने कहा कि माहौलियाती तब्दीली, सनती मसावात और लड़कियों की तालीम सब आपस में जुड़ी हुई हैं। ये मेरा एक छोटा सा हिस्सा है जो मैंने दिया। फिर बात आती है बलूचिस्तान में ख़वातीन के अहवाल की। चाहे आप हामला हों, चाहे हैज़ की कैफियत में हों या बिस्तर मर्ग पर भी हों, आपको पहले घर के लिए पानी का इंतज़ाम करना है। ये आपकी ज़िम्मेदारी है। और तीसरी बात ये कि इन औरतों को मालूम ही नहीं कि वो क्या लेकर जा रही हैं। क्या पानी का मयार अच्छा है या बुरा, वो पानी पीने के काबिल है या नहीं। और अगर मैं बलूचिस्तान की हुकूमत की बात करूं तो सीमा को भी मालूम है कि हमारी कोई भी पॉलिसी नहीं जो कि माहौलियाती तब्दीली के हवाले से हो या पानी के हवाले से। अगर हुकूमत पाकिस्तान या आलमी बैंक बलूचिस्तान में पानी के मसाइल के हवाले से बात भी करते हैं तो बस इतनी कि पानी के ज़खायर ख़त्म हो रहे हैं। कोई इस बारे में बात नहीं करता कि वो औरत जो रोज़ पानी भरती है उसको किन मुश्किलात से गुजरना पड़ता है। उस औरत का जिनसी इस्तेसाल हो सकता है, वो जिनसी ज़्यादती का शिकार हो सकती है, गैरत के नाम पर कत्ल हो सकती है या शायद रास्ते ही में बच्चे को जन्म दे सकती है। ये हालात हैं बलूचिस्तान के, और पूरी दुनिया को देखें तो 21 मिलियन औरतें इन मसाइल का शिकार हैं। जैसे कि मलाला ने कहा कि 2021 में 4 मिलियन लड़कियों ने माहौलियाती तब्दीली के बाइस तालीम छोड़ दी और 2025 तक 12 मिलियन लड़कियों की तालीम छोड़ देने का अंदेशा है, और इसकी वजह भी माहौलियाती तब्दीली है। बलूचिस्तान के पास सिर्फ बारिश के या ज़मीनी पानी हासिल है। अब यहाँ ये सवाल है कि औरतें कहाँ से वाबडा में, आब पाशी में कहीं भी औरतें नज़र ना आएँ। हमें लड़कियों को शैल देनी चाहिए। और बलूचिस्तान में सांस के अमराज भी बहुत हैं क्योंकि हम खाना पकाने के लिए लकड़ियाँ जलाते हैं। और मेरे पास इसके अलावा भी बहुत सी कहानियाँ हैं। मैं दुनिया को बताना चाहूँगी कि पानी की किल्लत महज पानी ना होने का नाम नहीं, बल्कि इससे एक औरत की ज़िंदगी जुड़ी होती है। वो रात में सो नहीं पाती क्योंकि इसे सुबह अपने घर वालों के लिए पानी का इंतज़ाम करना है। हम माहौलियाती तब्दीली को ही जी रहे हैं। बलूचिस्तान में ख़ासकर गवादर और तुर्बत के इलाक़ों में घरेलू इस्तेमाल के पानी की जाँच की बेहद ज़रूरत है कि आया वो पीने के काबिल भी है या नहीं, क्योंकि मर्द नेस्ले और ईरानी पानी पी लेते हैं क्योंकि ये इनकी सेहत के लिए ज़रूरी है, लेकिन औरतों को इसकी कोई ज़रूरत नहीं। ये मेरा हिस्सा था।
For illustrating the stark reality of the water scarcity in Balochistan and also the role of women in terms of collecting water, how difficult it is, on a daily basis, and linking that to not just academic water scarcity issues, but the fact that it then relates to real live women and how their lives are being affected and how they live on a daily basis, and bringing home that reality to us today, which we're aware of, but the way you brought it out, the way you talk about it, especially in the context of Balochistan, I think that is the stark reality. So thank you for that. Before we move on to more, or to a discussion, I know we have questions in the chat. Can we take a few questions, please, to each of our panelists?
I have an opinion that Constitution of Pakistan allows the state responsibility to provide clean water to every human in the country. But I think the far-flung areas, the remote areas, the rural areas, I think that was not provided into Constitution, because no state, no provincial government, no federal government bothers for the people in the rural area and the remote area, because their own departments have made the legislation that they can work only in up to those villages having population of 500 only. Below 500 people, it's not mandate of any government, neither provincial government nor federal government. It means that public, at least up to 60%, is out of Constitution of Pakistan. The states don't agree to Constitution of Pakistan. In the result, Sindh province has brackish water in underground and no irrigation water with them. What is the situation to those people, whether those are women or whether those are men? In the result, they are involved in so many illnesses. I see the kidney failures and like that, but even they have no hospital. So they only believe in this, that human has to die any day. So if they die on account of water, it is the death from God. But the state still is not responsible for that. So let us struggle that all those 60% people must be counted under Constitution of Pakistan. The state shall be made responsible to provide each and individual human in the Pakistan, to provide them clean water.
शुक्रिया गुरनाज हमें ज़मीनी हक़ाइक़ से आगाह करने के लिए। कोई सवालात हों तो ज़रूर करें। मेरा यह सवाल है कि पाकिस्तान के आइन में पानी की फरहमी को यकीनी बनाना शामिल है, मगर कोई भी देही इलाकों की बात नहीं करना चाहता, क्योंकि कानून साजी के दौरान ये बात की जाती है कि जिन देहातों की आबादी 500 या इससे ज़ायद है तो हम वहाँ ही काम करेंगे। 500 से कम लोग किसी भी हुकूमत के मैंडेट में शामिल नहीं होते। इसका मतलब यह हुआ कि तकरीबन 60% आबादी पाकिस्तान के आइन से बाहर है। ये ज़मीन में पानी होने के बावजूद इनको मुयस्सर नहीं है। औरतें, मर्द सब ही इससे मुतासर हैं। इसके नतीजे में वो बहुत सी बीमारियों का शिकार हैं और इनको कोई इलाज भी मुयस्सर नहीं है। इनका ये मानना है कि एक दिन तो मरना ही है, लिहाजा अगर पानी की कमी या इलाज ना होने से मर भी जाएं तो ये खुदा की तरफ से है। तो 60% लोग भी आइन का हिस्सा होने चाहिए। ये हुकूमत की जिम्मेदारी है। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।
Thank you for your comments. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Seema to respond to that.
What it's saying is absolutely right, that constitutionally and legally and in our various documents, the smaller population which are very scattered are not catered for. So that creates a real problem in terms of what Granaz was saying. And of course, Granaz, with the hard work that she does and the daily commute and all of that, she's equal to 10 of us really, in terms of the power and the leadership. So what she was pointing out is, I think, being reflected by Mr. Chandio, that yes, that is an area that we as women need to focus, because men are much more concerned about productivities and the irrigated areas and, you know, the industry that happens in cities. But what about the small populations whose basic human right of drinking water and domestic water and water for livelihood is not being met, especially, as Granaz said, in the rain-fed areas that don't have irrigation and in the really water-scarce areas. Chandio Saab also pointed out that we don't have enough legislation for groundwater, and that was also reflected by Granas. So what do we do in areas that have groundwater and rainwater? You know, recently I've been working on it with a number of other friends that we need to go to pondage. We need to do pondage in the millions, and that is something which we can do. Granas, you remember the last time we met, that was followed by a huge rain and floods, and they were like thousands of these ponds popped up overnight, and with a little bit of lining and some little very low scale engineering, we could save and store all that water for using in times, you know, where women have to walk long distances. So thank you, both of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Seema, and thank you, Chandrisa, for bringing that up as well. Do we have any more questions, Sana or Faria? We don't? Okay. Then in that case, I think we can open up our discussion, which means we do have another 5 minutes. So we could just open up our discussion. I'd like to just talk about one thing which you mentioned, Seema, in terms of the stories that you said you want to collect, and directly link that with what Granas said, where she's looking for someone to amplify the kind of stories that she has and that she collects. So I think this is one place where you could share and we could bring in that information from Balochistan. So it's an opportunity.
I've just done a story which we've converted into a serial on Cholistan.
Oh, really?
And the plight of the women from that area.
Really? Okay.
And it's, they have spoken themselves, and they walked up to 40 miles to fetch a pot of water. There was a train which had started from Sakhar to Bhavalpur, which was carrying water. It goes twice a week. They have to reach the train station in order to collect that pot of water. So they are the stories from Balochistan. I would love for those to come to us, and between Seema and myself, we'll design a narrative, and we have writers who can do it.
Yes. Granas, so there's one outcome of this. Are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes. Yes,
so
I can hear you.
We commit that we will help you bring these stories out, whether they be in the form of a book or that in addition, and then, you know, with Seema's excellent storytelling, to put it out there on media, on mainstream media, so that people can know, and we can also advocate the results we want. We can advocate for women's leadership, we can advocate for pondage, we can advocate for water for livelihoods, women's roles in a climate changed world, all of those. So Granas, thank you very much.
Economic empowerment.
Yes, that too. So that at least is one solid thing which has come out of this this webinar series.
चांडियो साहब, जैसे कि गुरनाज ने भी कहा और चांडियो साहब ने भी कि छोटी आबादी के लिए भी पानी और जिंदगी गुजारने के वसाइल की फरहमी को यकीनी बनाना लाजमी है। हमें क्या करना है कि बहुत बड़ी तादाद में तालाब बनाने हैं। गुरनाज, अगर आपको याद हो तो हमने कुछ साल पहले ये ही किया था कि बहुत बड़ी तादाद में तालाब बनाए थे जहां बारिशों का पानी जमा होता था, और फिर थोड़ी सी मेहनत और इंजीनियरिंग के जरिए पानी के मसाइल को हल करने की कोशिश की थी। शुक्रिया सीमी। कोई और सवाल हैं? नहीं, चलें फिर हम अपनी बात आगे बढ़ाते हैं। जैसा कि गुरनाज ने कहा कि इनके पास कुछ ऐसी कहानियां हैं जिसे वो नशर करना चाहती हैं। सीमा, मैं बताती चलूं कि कुछ अर्से कबल मैंने एक सीरियल बनाया था जिसमें चोलिस्तान की कहानी दिखाई थी, जहां औरतों को एक मटका पानी भरने के लिए 40-40 मील का सफर तय करना पड़ता था। एक ट्रेन सक्कर से भवलपुर जाती थी और पानी लेकर ये औरतें वहां रेलवे स्टेशन पर लाइन में खड़ी होती थी ताकि अपना मटका भर कर ले जा सकें। तो अगर गुरनाज के पास भी ऐसी कोई कहानी मौजूद है तो मैं इस पर काम करना चाहूँगी। सीमी, गुरनाज, अगर आप सुन रही हैं तो आप ज़रूर अपनी कहानियाँ लेकर हमारे दफ्तर आएँ। हम ज़रूर इस पर ड्रामा बनाएंगे या फिर किसी किताब की सूरत में इसे शाया करेंगे।
I wanted to ask you, Meher, that since you have been in the environment sector now for so long, what are some of the changes you have seen? Like what was happening 3 decades ago and what's happening now in terms of the way the problems were defined? Have they been feminized over the years? How are they being looked at now?
महर, मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूँगी कि आप क्योंकि बहुत अरसे से माहौलियाती शोबे से वाबस्ता हैं, तो आप क्या तब्दीली देखती हैं?
I think, Seema, in the past, the changes that I have seen is that how, well, when we started, it was women's issues, then it became women in development issues. Environment was also sort of looked at more in abstract terms. But gradually over time that has changed, and we're much more focused now in terms of understanding the role of women, which in the past there wasn't that. The sort of first 10, 12 years was really trying to understand what do women do, what are their roles. But now that's very clear. We all know what women do. They are the managers of the natural resource. We know the role women play. We know how important their role is. There is a greater understanding, a deeper understanding. And I think that has led to the change both in the environment field as well as in terms of action, in terms of projects, in terms of programs, in terms of gender mainstreaming, the greater understanding of women's role within the environment and the close association with women and natural resources, and how women are dependent on natural resources, how they manage them, how climate change has affected women. Specifically, as they say, climate change is not gender neutral, and women do have a greater burden to play. They are the first who are affected by climate change, because as water becomes scarcer, as we've seen just now in Balochistan and what Granas said, it's the women that have to walk further afield. They're the ones who have less time to do anything else because they're looking for water, whether it's fuel, fodder, water, any of the natural resources. And similarly, the alarming increase and linkages between gender-based violence and climate change. This is something that is now emerging. And it's coming across globally, regionally, and at a local level, and there is a lot of research being done on it at the moment in terms of the link between climate change and then gender-based violence, which was a link that was not seen before, but now it's coming out. And it's also because of climate change, which affects incomes and how that is affecting incomes of households, and therefore it affects the psyche within the household, and the violence escalates, and how women then bear the brunt of that. So I think in terms of the changes, Seema, there is a lot more awareness. There's a lot more awareness that has been created, partly because of the women's movements, and not only just the women's movement, but also women in the environment sector, and how many more women have come into that sector. And so therefore, a greater understanding, awareness, knowledge, and gender mainstreaming at all levels. So there has been a change. We need to build on that. Yeah. And the building on that comes from what we're doing today in terms of articulation, bringing in more women, making all our voices heard from the rural areas, from our sections of society, and the youth. A lot of young people, and there's so much more happening today in terms of climate activism, bringing women's voices, the youth in that. Seema, for your articulation of your dream, of what you think where women should be in the future. Zareen, thank you for your, the way you moderated the first part of the session. And we know now the numbers of leaders, or the number of women in leadership positions has grown. We've seen that. But as Seema mentioned, we need to be more forceful. We need to be there at all different levels. And I think what we've also highlighted is that the need for a new feminist social contract. That was brought up also by one of our earlier speakers. So just in conclusion, I would just say thank you. We've had a very interesting discussion today. It's the end of our 5th webinar series for Hisar Foundation. It's been a pleasure to be here, and I think that's a basic summary of what we heard today. So thank you to our panelists and all our participants. Thank you. I'll hand over to Sana for her closing.
30 साल पहले और अब में क्या फ़र्क है? जब हमने शुरू किया इस वक्त ख़वातीन के मसाइल थे, मगर अब ये तब्दील हो गया है। माहौलियाती तब्दीली में औरतों के किरदार पर बात करना अब ज़रूरी हो गया है। कैसे औरतें कुदरती वसाइल का इस्तेमाल करती हैं, کیسے ان کو قدرتی وسائل کے مسائل کا سامنا ہے، اس پر بہت کام ہو رہا ہے کہ ماحولیاتی تبدیلی اور صنعتی مساوات کا آپس میں کیا تعلق ہے، کیسے یہ تبدیلی لوگوں کی آمدنی پر اثر انداز ہو رہی ہے اور کیسے گھر کے معاملات اور نفسیات اس سے متاثر ہو رہے ہیں، کیسے پھر گھریلو تشدد میں اضافہ ہوتا جا رہا ہے اور عورتیں اس سے متاثر ہوتی ہیں۔ لہٰذا اب آخر میں زرین اور مہر آپ کا بھی بہت شکریہ کہ اتنی اچھی طرح آگاہی میں اضافہ ہوا ہے، خواتین کی تحریک کی وجہ سے بھی اور خواتین کے اس شعبے میں شمولیت کی وجہ سے بھی تو تبدیلی آتی ہے اور اس پر مزید کام کرنے کی ضرورت ہے۔ مزید کام ایسے ہوگا کہ مزید خواتین کو اس شعبے میں لایا جائے، ان کو آگاہی دی جائے اور ان کی آواز سنی جائے۔ نوجوانوں کو بھی اس حوالے سے آگے لانے کی ضرورت ہے۔ سیما بہت بہت شکریہ اپنے خواب ہم تک پہنچانے کے لیے۔ زرین آپ کا بھی شکریہ کہ اس سیشن کا حصہ بنی، اور جیسا کہ سیمی نے کہا کہ ہمیں مزید طاقتور اور مضبوط ہونا پڑے گا۔ آخر میں سب کا شکریہ ادا کرنا چاہوں گی، آج ہمارا آخری ویبینار تھا۔ ثنا، اب آپ اختتام میں کچھ کہنا چاہیں تو کہیں۔
So, with this interesting and delightful session, we conclude the 5th Karachi International Water Conference webinar series, Climate Change and Pandemic, Impact on Water. It gives me great pleasure today to thank the people behind the scenes, without whose support this webinar would not have been possible. Thank you to our presenters for today, Aisha Khan, who reminded us that women are not just affectees of the climate crisis, but they can take over the conversation. Seema Kamal for her inspiring presentation and showing us that women are already in leadership positions. And Dr. Fazilda Nabil for her insightful presentation. It reminded me of Erin Brockovich and Lake Diva. Thank you to our panelists, Seema Tahir Khan and Granaz Balot, for sharing their experiences and knowledge with us. Thanks to our moderators, Zareen Bakir and Meher Makanor Sherwani, for curating and moderating today's session seamlessly. You know, I just want to add here that we had an all-women panel, and we have all women behind this webinar series. We really get things done, and we do things on time. I would like to thank our lead sponsor, Engro Foundation. Engro Foundation has been supporting the Karachi International Water Conferences since 2015. A big thank you to all our sponsors, International Water Management Institute Pakistan, HANDS, and WWF Pakistan, for their support and contributions towards our webinar series. A very, very big thank you to our media partners, Airwaves Media Group, led by Seema Tahir Khan, who we are indebted to, which includes TV1, NewsOne, FM 91, and Wakeup TV, for coverage of our webinars on TV, radio, and social media. Thank you to Zohair Rashid. I'm not sure if he's here or not, but thank you to Zohair Rashid, the visionary behind the Karachi International Water Conference. It was his dream in 2013, and today we are 5 conferences strong. Thank you to Seema Kamal, the chairperson and CEO of Hisar Foundation, and a constant source of guidance and support to all of us, and as she knows, my biggest mentor. A special thank you to all my colleagues at Hisar Foundation, but especially to Faria O'Kelly, who is the pulse behind this webinar series, and Samin Huda for supporting the Secretariat and all the designing that she's done. Finally, thank you to all of you, our audience, for your participation and engaging questions. And we hope to see all of you at the 6th Karachi International Water Conference in 2023. Thank you so much.
آپ تمام معاونین کا شکریہ جن کے تعاون کے بغیر یہ ویبینار ممکن نہیں تھا۔ ہمارے تمام پریزنٹرز کا شکریہ، عائشہ خان جنہوں نے ہمیں یاد دلایا کہ عورتیں ماحولیاتی تبدیلی کا محض شکار نہیں ہیں بلکہ یہ اس کے حل کے لیے بھی کام کر سکتی ہیں، سیمی کمال کا جنہوں نے بہت متاثر کن پریزنٹیشن دی اور بتایا کہ عورتیں اقتدار کی پوری صلاحیت رکھتی ہیں، بہت شکریہ، فضلدہ نبیل جنہوں نے ہمیں بہت اچھی پریزنٹیشن دی، بہت شکریہ سیما طاہر اور گرناز بلوچ اپنے تجربات ہم سے بانٹنے کے لیے۔ آخر میں زرین اور مہر آپ کا بھی بہت شکریہ کہ اتنی اچھی طرح آپ نے اس پروگرام کی میزبانی کی۔ میں یہاں یہ بات کرنا چاہوں گی کہ اس ویبینار کے تمام پینلسٹ عورتیں تھیں اور ویبینار کے اہتمام کے پیچھے بھی عورتیں ہی تھیں۔ تمام کام بہت اچھی طرح اور وقت پر ہو گیا۔ میں اپنے معاون اینگرو فاؤنڈیشن کا شکریہ ادا کرنا چاہوں گی، ہمارے تمام معاونین کا شکریہ، WWF، ہینڈز، وسیب ٹی وی، FM 91، NewsOne، ہمارے میڈیا پارٹنرز، ایئر ویو میڈیا، سب کا بہت شکریہ. زہیر رشید کا بھی شکریہ جن کا خواب تھا کہ یہ کانفرنس منعقد کرنا. سیمی کمال کا بہت شکریہ، اور فاریہ عقیلی جو کہ اس ویبینار کے پیچھے رہیں، اور سمین ہدا جنہوں نے تمام ڈیزائننگ کی. آخر میں آپ تمام لوگوں کا شکریہ جنہوں نے ہمیں سنا. ہمیں امید ہے کہ 6th KIWC میں آپ سے پھر ملاقات ہوگی.
Hisar Foundation and Engro Foundation, in association with TV1, NewsOne, Waseb and FM 91, presents the 5th Karachi International Water Conference webinar series on climate change and pandemic impact on water.